Hey everyone, Eric Adams here. Last year I purchased a Onefinity CNC machine. My son and his friend have been using it from time to time to carve topographic mountain ranges for some of the places they've visited recently. But mostly, it's just been patiently waiting for me to catch up on holster orders. And before I go any further, I just wanted to take a moment and apologize for all of the background noise. The temperatures in my shop started at 90 degrees, and by the end of the day it was sitting right at 100. I had several fans going, so there's quite a bit of background noise. I start off by inserting an old and broken 30-degree engraving bit that I used to align the CNC machine with the center of my stock. Then I reset the X and Y home positions before playing a brief game of lawn darts with the surface of my scrap piece of cedar. I switched out the engraving bit with a 1/4 inch radius bowl bit, then probed Z so the machine knows where the top surface of the wood is in relation to the tip of the router bit. The cut settings I'm using are approximately 18,000 RPM on the router, with a 1/4 inch step down and a 1/4 inch step over, and 140 inches per minute for the feed rate. The machine was able to cut the cedar pretty well at those speeds, but I'll probably take a less aggressive cut depth or step over in the future to help avoid some of the chatter when it was cutting across the grain. Last Christmas, my wife Kimberly and I decided that it was time to take a break from the leather holster business for a while. We stopped taking new orders at the first of the year, and I've spent the last 6 months completing all of my remaining holster orders. After 12 years of working an 8 to 5 and then coming home to fulfill holster orders at night and on the weekends, it's been nice to slow down and make some time for other hobbies. And of course, more importantly, family time. Recently, I've been using the CNC to carve bowls made from my pre-pandemic stash of Eastern and Western Red Cedar scraps. Since the scraps are all various sizes and thicknesses, I used Fusion 360's parametric modeling tool to automatically adjust the size of the bowl based on the available stock dimensions. The bowl I'm making here is a little more complicated. I haven't quite figured out how to make it parametric because frankly, I'm not very good with Fusion 360 yet. The footage you've seen so far is playing back at regular speed and has not been sped up at all. But to help minimize the boredom for those that don't want to watch all 45 minutes of real-time carving, I'll now speed it up to 400%. In case you're wondering, the machine starts off by roughing out most of the material at predetermined depths, which, as I mentioned previously, I have set at 1/4 inch per pass. Once the 1/4 inch of wood is removed, it then comes back and slowly stair steps up the side to create the inner curved profile of the bowl. It repeats this process until the entire depth of the bowl is carved out. The circular lines you see on the bottom of the bowl appear to be uneven ridges, and while that may be true to some extent, what you're actually seeing is similar to the stripes you see when mowing the lawn. The router bit is laying down the fibers of the wood in different directions, affecting the way the surface reflects light on a microscopic level. The lines sand away very easily with almost no effort. None of the bowls I've carved before have had any type of lining in the bottom, so I figured what better time to try something new than when I'm filming a YouTube video for you guys. I'm switching out the bowl bit for a 1/4 inch spiral downcut end mill bit. I'll use this to carve out a 1/8 inch deep pocket in the bottom of the bowl. which is just about right for a piece of 8-ounce vegetable tanned leather. The cut settings I'm using are 1/8 inch step down with a 1/8 inch step over and 144 inches per minute feed rate. I have the program set to carve out the pocket, a little different than the previous operation. It will start out by clearing a pocket down the center of the bowl, and then it will slowly migrate outward in a spiral motion until it reaches the edge of the cutting area. This is playing back at normal speed, but now we'll speed it up to 400%, so those of you that are still here won't completely fall asleep. With the inside of the bowl carved out, I carefully pried the wood away from the wasteboard and removed the double-sided tape. And after accidentally applying more double-sided tape to the wrong side of the bowl, I flipped it over and applied it to the top edge of the bowl perimeter. My wasteboard has a horizontal groove that I cut into the wasteboard with a 90-degree V-bit. I carefully position the edge of the cedar into the groove and then slowly rotate the wood down onto the table. Every time you reposition the stock, you have to re-zero the X and Y coordinates on the machine so it knows where the center of the wood is. So I insert my lawn dart back into the machine and repeat the zeroing process. It doesn't show up very well on camera, but I'm aligning the bit with the X mark that I drew onto the wood at the beginning of the video, and now I clear out the X and Y to reset the home. To carve the outside of the bowl, I'll again be using my 1/4 inch radius bowl bit. The process is the same. The machine will perform a roughing pass to remove the majority of the wood in 1/4 inch deep increments, and then it will slowly stair-step up the side of the bowl to remove the rest of the material. Here you can see a closer look at the machine slowly carving away the material to create the final shape of the bowl. I ended up having a bit of chip out on the top edge of the bowl, which as you're looking at it right now would be the surface touching the table. And the cutting profile of the router bit wasn't able to cut all the way to the top edge of the bowl due to the radius shape of the bit. I ended up having to sand off roughly 1/8 of an inch from the top edge of the bowl to remove the chip out and the excess material that the router didn't remove. I'm certainly no CNC guru, but I think on future attempts, I'll use my 1/4 inch spiral end mill to quickly trace the top perimeter of the bowl right after I cut the interior recessed pocket, but before I flip the piece over. That should help eliminate the chip out, though I'll still have to sand away the little bit of wood that the radius bit didn't catch. And as you're looking at it right now, I've already fixed those mistakes. The piece of cedar I'm using had a bit of checking down the length of the stock. I knew the split was there, but pandemic beggars can't be choosers, so I'm working with what I have laying around the shop. I pressed a bit of glue into the cracks, then sanded away the excess glue to help reinforce the cracks. When I designed the bowl, I wanted to maintain sharp corners on the outside face of the bowl, so I did my best to avoid rounding over the edges. I'm sanding the outside of the bowl with 80 grit sandpaper on my random orbital sander, and then a final sanding with 220 grit sandpaper. I used Fusion 360 to export the profile for the interior pocket of the bowl. Then I cut out a cardstock template and traced it onto a piece of leather. Even though I cut out the leather by hand as precisely as I could, I still had trouble getting the leather inlay to fit cleanly into the pocket on the bowl. So I took the easy way out and used my laser to cut out the leather. I wanted to add a simple, decorative border to the inlay. So, to help minimize stretching from all the hammering with stamping tools, I applied a couple pieces of packing tape to the flesh side of the vegetable tanned leather. I dampened the grain side of the leather with a little bit of water, then gave it a few minutes to soak in to case the leather before tooling. Normally when I dye a project, I use Fiebing's Pro Dyes, but I wanted to try something I've had sitting on the shelf, but never actually used before. This is Fiebing's Vintage Gel, and you simply wipe it on in a circular motion, then wipe away the excess and buff it to a shine. The gel stays down in the tooling impressions and adds a nice antiqued effect. I'll be applying my maker's mark with my laser engraver. So, using a straight edge, I marked the center of the bottom of the bowl, then burned in the logo. A quick sanding with 220 grit sandpaper easily removes the discoloration around the edge of the engraving. And then I blew away the dust with an air compressor. I like using non-toxic wax and oil finishes on these cedar bowls since they still allow the natural scent of the cedar to come through. What I'm using here is butcher block conditioner that I picked up at the local big box store. I'd like to switch to something with a little higher wax content. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comment section. As you can see here, I applied the conditioner to the wood and allowed it to soak in, then came back a little while later and buffed off the excess. I tried to avoid getting the conditioner inside the interior recessed pocket since I'll be gluing the piece of leather there with contact cement. I was careful to leave a little bit of raw wood around the outer edge of the pocket, as well as around the outer edge of the piece of leather. I wanted to make sure I could position the leather inside the pocket without it sticking into place in the wrong spot. But the edges ended up curling up a tiny bit, so I yanked it out and reapplied cement to the whole pocket and the entire back face of the leather. So that's about it. The machining operation took about 47 minutes to carve, plus setup time. With the extra time for sanding, oiling, tooling the leather, and gluing everything together, the entire job took probably about 1.5 to 2 hours of total labor. As I said before, I'm pretty much new to the CNC world, and I have a lot to learn, but I hope this video was interesting to some of you. I certainly had a fun time making it, and I'm happy with the way the bowl turned out. My wife said it's her favorite one so far. Anyways, thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.